Welcome to Holistically Speaking. I'm Hilary Russo, certified holistic health coach and health and wellness journalist. This is an empowering place to explore self-awareness, self-love, and transformation through health, healing, and humor. By sharing life-changing experiences, knowledge, and guests with varied expertise, we'll explore who we are, how we got that way, and what it takes to be a happy and healthy grown-up. Mind, body, and spirit. I'm glad you're here. Of course. When you hear those words, how do you feel? Of course. It's interesting that two words can have so much power when it comes to acceptance, validation, and empathy. The trouble is, we rarely are using those words when we are talking to ourselves. We spend a lot of time beating ourselves up, don't we? That inner bully loves to come out and play. And it can really mean the difference between hurting and healing. But here's the good news. When it comes to struggles of self-talk, we have the capacity to alter our thoughts, our moods, and our behaviors that not only impact self, but those around us. Humans are wired for connection, belonging, and resonance with others. But it begins within. If anyone understands this, it's Sarah Peyton. As a certified trainer of nonviolent communication, a constellation facilitator, and neuroscience educator, Sarah integrates brain science and the use of resonant language to heal trauma and nourish self-warmth with exquisite gentleness. And when you listen to her during our conversation, you can't help but feel that warmth that she puts out in the world. That's Sarah. It was her book, Your Resonant Self, that brought Sarah into my life, and I am elated to share her so that you too can restore your own capacity for self-love by being kind to your mind. Sarah, what a pleasure to have you here on Holistically Speaking. I have been a fan of yours for a very long time. Have read your beautiful book, Your Resonant Self. And I just love hearing from you because I feel like whenever I listen to your meditations, whenever I read your book, I hear you speaking through the book. And whenever, I have a chance to just read anything that you share with your community, which I'm happy to be a part of, I feel like you're there. And that's a very special gift that you have.
Oh, I'm very happy to know it.
Yeah. So I would love to have you share more about Your Resonant Self. I mean, this book is really such a beautiful work of art, and how it came to be and how you came to be and finding this work and helping other people through their healing is such a powerful story. So if we could start there and just kind of go back to the younger Sarah and the one who came into this kind of work from what you were doing to what you're doing now.
Well, I was doing all kinds of funny things, including selling art and antique textiles. But what was really happening for me was that I was in a difficult relationship with the inside of my own brain, coming out of a childhood where my folks both had unacknowledged trauma that impacted them in different ways. And I hadn't even realized how intense my mom's trauma was until just 2 years ago. Here I am, I'm 57, almost 58. 2 years ago, my cousin gave me a newspaper clipping of the divorce proceedings of my mother's mother, relaying horrific accounts of domestic violence that I just had. We had no idea were a part of my mother's life. But all of a sudden, even just 2 years ago, things kind of were like clicking into place. Oh my God, no wonder. So I was coming out of childhood, one of those people who could not meditate. I could not meditate because if I stopped for long enough to breathe and focus on my breath, then my default mode network would kick in with horrific self-judgment and recriminations and shame spirals. So I was like, let me just stay out of my own brain. And of course, so many of us are in a constant pursuit of staying out of our own brains with whatever our addictions might be. I used to read at stoplights in order to keep my default mode network at bay so that it would kick in those quiet moments at the red light.
For those who aren't familiar with Your Resonant Self and the work you do, can you explain a little bit what the default mode network is?
Yes, of course. The default mode network is a network of brain areas that work together as soon as we're not focusing our brain intentionally on anything that is trying to stitch us into our own lives. It's like a kind of an inner tailor that's sitting there going, oh, yes, and yesterday this happened, and tomorrow we're anticipating this. And it's supposed to be a real resource for us to help us remember things and remember people and track what we're supposed to do, and also for us to be able to rest and harvest and integrate our lives. But for those of us who've lived through trauma, or unaccompanied experiences of being alone, one of the things that can happen is that the default mode network, in the effort to take care of us, in the effort to be kind to us and gather us together and keep us going, what it's learned to do is batter us. It's like it thinks, if I beat Sarah up hard enough, then she'll get off her butt and everything will be fine.
It's like the coach that you kind of don't want, but you feel like you need, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So how do we deal with that default mode network, that inner bully? Because you actually explain it really well in the book, where you talk about how we talk to ourselves. With your background with nonviolent communication, and which is so important. It's something everyone should learn, just learning how we talk to ourselves, because we really are the ones that beat ourselves up the most. And I, myself included, and I'm sure you as well, we go to this place where something I did must have been wrong to create what happened in my present, which is going to be my future. My past is my future, which is so how we need to change how we talk to ourselves.
Yes. And so one of the ways that helps us change the way that we talk to ourselves is beginning to learn, like, that this voice is trying to take care of us. Brutal, cruel, relentless, merciless though it may be.
Right.
That it's trying to do its best for us. And so then we can start to take its messages with a grain of salt, instead of believing the message that Sarah is so stupid, to begin to say, thank you, voice. Thank you for your opinion of me.
And you really have a beautiful way of touching on that from the first meditation you share in your book, Your Resonant Self. And this book isn't new. It's been out a while, but you have a wonderful gift, I must add, a wonderful, beautiful gift of sharing meditations throughout the book that people can download, use at any time. But that first one you share about the one cell really paves the way for how we need to embody who we are, and how we need to embrace and hug the Sarahs and the Hillarys and anyone else out there, that it's us first.
Yeah. And one of the things we do in that one cell meditation is just imagine one representative cell of your body. And one representative cell usually is a small enough amount that we can even have some tenderness or compassion for it, instead of it pulling us into the dislike of self that can be so common. So if we just imagine that little cell on the palm of our hand, what does it need? What is it longing for? That's a very sweet meditation to begin to step into.
It's so beautiful. And you just even sharing it right now in just the smallest piece as I'm listening to you, it's almost like everybody out there listening just got a little piece of Sarah, because your meditations are just really beautiful. And it allows you to just sit back in the moment for a few minutes, because they're not long meditations, and really embrace and embody that time that you're giving to yourself, which we are so guilty of not doing. I'm too busy. I don't know how to meditate. I can't stay focused. It reminds me of that one scene in the movie Eat, Pray, Love, where Julia Roberts is meditating at the ashram for the first time, and she's trying to sit there in silence and swatting the flies, and she can't meditate. And sometimes I feel people who aren't comfortable in meditation, and even those who do, it's a practice, and it is getting out of your head in order to just be present. So you kind of pave the way for that with the story of the one cell and the nurturing. And then from there, you build on that with your other meditations. Yeah, which is really beautiful. Can you go into the whole idea of the purpose and power of self-hate?
Yeah, there are many different ways that self-hate makes sense. So we'll talk about a couple of them. One of the ways that self-hate makes sense, because it doesn't make sense if we're just thinking of ourselves all standing here alone as an individual. We're just like, why am I hating myself? But if we take our present day body, adult body, and we kind of time travel ourselves into our childhood home, then we might begin to have a sense of the ways that self-hate makes sense. If we're thinking systemically, if we're thinking about the family as a whole and about the deep desire that every human has to contribute to the systems that they're in. I remember I was doing a piece on self-hate and ran into a 67-year-old woman who she said, I've hated myself for 67 years. I said, tell me a little about what it was like to be a child. What happened for you? She said, I was the 8th of 8 children born to a mother and the father had died just recently, and we were living on the side of the railroad tracks, and there was one room for all of us, and I was a terrible burden. And I said, well, do you have self-hate in order to try to lessen your mother's burden? And she said, yes. And she burst into tears, and she said, I had this tremendous lightening of my whole life. I've been carrying this in honor of my mother's pain. I didn't want to be a burden. Of course I would have hated myself. It was a way to atone for my existence. And so these are very interesting questions we get to begin to ask when we see ourselves not just as individuals, but as contributing members of larger systems.
How do we go about asking ourselves those questions? Where do we start?
Well, this is actually book 2, which is coming out on May 25th, 2021. And can be ordered at this moment on all the different online book services. But this is like something we can do with grammar. It's very interesting. We can use grammar to fish in our own brains for things we don't even know about ourselves. So I can say, I, Sarah, solemnly swear to my essential self, like put it into a contract form, that I will hate myself in order to, and that in order to all of a sudden surprises people. It's like, I will hate myself in order to? In order to what? Why would I hate myself? But if they kind of feel into their bodies, then they come up with these amazing things. Like, I will hate myself in order to be in integrity with my dislike of humans existing on the planet at all. Or I will hate myself in order to preemptively keep myself from being disappointed by other people not liking me. Or I will hate myself in order to make sense of the terrible violence and destruction of my family home. Yeah.
Yeah, that's we really beat ourselves up. That's the unconscious contract that we tell ourselves, right? Which you do share. How do we go about changing that? Where do we start?
Well, as soon as we can say the words, we're shifting, and this is key for making our brains good places to live, is the experience of naming unnamed experience. When we give words to things that we've never named before, they settle inside of us, and we can, like, once they become explicitly available, we can ask ourselves, hey, if this is a contract, do I want to keep it? And sometimes people are like, yes, I want to keep this contract. This contract keeps me safe. And sometimes people say, heck no, this is not a contract that I want Sarah to have to live with. I release you from this contract, Sarah, and I revoke this vow. And it's not so simple, but people's bodies really shift in the experience of naming what has never been put into words before.
For yourself and what you've been through and the growth and development and the light that you've become and what you're sharing with the world, has it been difficult for Sarah Peyton to take this journey herself?
It is difficult. And I sometimes give myself pep talks. And I here you are having a shame spiral, and you wrote your resonant self. Would you be willing to have a little resonance for yourself instead of beating yourself up relentlessly? What if you use some of your own information and material right now? Yes. So I invite myself into those places as well.
That goes back to the imposter syndrome in a way. You know, we do this work and we believe in what we do and we want to help others on their healing journeys, and whatever people are doing out there, and the listeners, whatever work that you do, whether it's personal and not professional, maybe it's just nurturing your family or yourself. We go to this place, right, where if we're not practicing what we preach, then we feel like we're failing.
Yeah.
And how do we face that fail? How do we not go to that place of being so hard on ourselves?
Well,
we all do it.
Yes, so we all do it. What I love is to kind of put another layer around whatever it is that we're doing. So if Sarah's not actually using a resonant voice with herself, but she's beating herself up, then what happens if I say to her, as sort of the larger self of Sarah, of course you're beating yourself up. Of course this is hard. Do you need a little acknowledgement of like the effects of the pandemic? Do you need a little acknowledgement that you're going stir crazy without getting to have access to all of your beloved people in the world? Do you long for somebody else to come and do it for you? But I mean, if we begin with those warm kind of resonant questions that are the heart of the book, Your Resonant Self, then we create this radical self-care and self-love that can never be defeated. We can always go bigger than our negativity. We can always go bigger than our self-lacerating judgments. And that's a radical way of living in the world.
It is. It does take time, though. I mean, we all do this, you know, and the amygdala, just to get a little neuroscience nerdy, obviously, because I'm speaking to the right person for this. The amygdala loves to go into that threat mode state, you know, and even as havening practitioners, you know, my group, we call her Amy. We create her in a feminine sense because of havening being such a very feminine touch type modality. But, you know, if she gets scared, we have to nurture her, much like we're put in our mother's arms right after we come out of the womb. That's the first place to create that nurturing. So it's almost like you really have to embrace yourself like the one cell, you know, and it's a constant reminder. We skin our knees all the time, you know? So it's a powerful lesson. And I think we're just starting to realize, Sarah, in this world, how unbelievably powerful we truly are and the control we truly do have over the brain and our thoughts.
Yeah. You know, how much changes when we bring warmth to it.
And how it's so easy to go to that other place and allow Amy to have a temper tantrum on the floor. Right? So, you know, there's something else that I kind of gravitated to in your book. And by the way, I want to, before we go there, we keep saying Your Resonant Self, which is the title of Sarah's book. But also, for those who might not be familiar with what resonance actually is, why don't you share?
Well, one of the teaching tools that I love the most for the idea of resonance is the cello. Because the cello is such a vibration experience when you're playing a cello and holding a cello or touching a cello or even listening to a cello. It's like you can feel the rumbles of the music in your body. And this is what we are meant to be feeling with one another. We're meant to be feeling one another's the kind of vibratory quality of emotions is here in the interpersonal space. So if we unlock our bodies from their habitual non-breathing and stasis, then all of a sudden they become extraordinary resonating instruments with one another. So resonance is really about the way that we're changed by relationship and changed by bringing our attention to somebody else. But it's also a duet, really, because we're making sure that what we think we're experiencing in resonance with our person actually is in resonance with them. And we say things like, I wonder if I'm understanding you. You know, is it a little bit like you're standing on the edge of a cliff and there's nowhere to go? And, you know, metaphor being a huge aspect of resonant language. And the other person gets to say, no, it's more like I'm trying to balance on a scree field of gravel and it's just slipping under my feet every moment. And you go, oh, a scree field of gravel, of course. And then there's resonance, because then the message is coming all the way through. And this is one of the things we learn to pay attention to as we're doing resonant language and being in resonant relationship with others and with the self, is what's it like to live in a world that has question marks in it? Because so much comes when we ask ourselves questions instead of telling ourselves, yeah.
Yeah. And going back to the cello, which that was something we shared in a prior conversation. You actually picked up that instrument.
Yes, when I was 50.
I love
I
it.
was like, I've always wanted to play the cello. And I had fantasized about playing the cello. And now that I'm 50, I will be able to play the cello and not have to play it for anyone and not have to be in recitals and not even have to imagine to myself that I should be the next Yo-Yo Ma. I can let all that go and I can just be Sarah dinking around on the cello. And I'm not very good, but I love it. I'm on book 1 and I've been doing it for 7 years, but I have a wonderful patient teacher and I get to feel the cello vibrate in my arms, and it's wonderful.
You're raising the vibration on many levels.
Yes.
How does it feel when you have the instrument in your hands?
Well, when you put the cello against you, when you're seated and playing, it the back of the cello rests right over your sternum, right over your heart. And if you don't clench up in terror about hitting the wrong note, I do a lot of breathing and stopping about my terror of wrong notes. And you just feel those vibrations. And it's just such a lovely experience of being in the world.
You inspire me to want to pick the violin back up. I played the violin for 10 years and I put it down after I was 18 and I still have it. It's my grandfather's too. And I remember the feeling when you're resting your head almost like it's a baby against your chin, against this beautiful instrument, this vibrational tone, or just a guitar in your hand or whatever. If you're taking up something new, that's the real lesson right here. In addition to the vibration and what we're feeling within, don't be scared to try something new. There's no I'm too old for. Right?
No. And there's just contracts in the way.
Exactly.
So you can start to name the contracts and say, I will never make a mistake in order to save myself from humiliation and ridicule. Is that helping me? Is that really helping me? And then you get to say, oh, no, I don't want that contract. I want something different. Yeah.
It goes back to something I remember in the book, a pretty strong quote that's early in the book. I think it's even chapter 1. I'm not sure, but you said every movement that is made towards gentleness with ourselves moves us closer to well-being.
Yeah.
Just the way that's written makes me feel gentler towards myself. And that, I guess, goes back to the idea of the DMN, the default mode network that we tend to go to, and really cherishing ourselves, So thank you for sharing that. That's, it can be very helpful with so many different things, those contracts that we make, the healing of the broken hearts, the family trauma and the ancestral trauma that you mentioned, and the shame that we feel, and the fact that we put so much on ourselves that really is unnecessary. But once we get to the point where something like this comes into our lives, or we have that shift, I would think, and you'd be the first one to share this, is that it's it's a constant work process. It's a practice.
It's
Right?
definitely a practice. It's a devotion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to move ourselves in this direction. And it's not immediate. I mean, there are some like these wonderful sort of aha moments that roll through the whole brain and reorganize things. But really, the brunt of the work happens with the growing of neural connections in the right hemisphere.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the work that's shown in the book Your Resonant Self
Mm-hmm.
is about trauma, about how to heal trauma and how to work with difficult memories, and to understand that difficult memories are difficult because they've never been accompanied, that no one's ever gone there with us. And because the amygdala, which, our friend Amy, because our friend Amy has no sense of time, she thinks every trauma is still happening.
Mm-hmm.
Which means it's a sort of a horror for PTSD for us. But what it really means is that every moment of trauma is waiting for us to accompany it. It's just right there. It's like a ripe berry waiting to fall into our hands when we do time travel. And the beautiful work of Ruth Lanius has shown that time travel changes the default mode network. We can see it visually.
Mm-hmm.
That when we create accompaniment for memories that are traumatic, we change the way the brain works on its automatic system.
Can you touch on that a little bit about that's one of your chapters about how the brain responds to accompaniment. What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean by that is that we take this research that's been done about babies,
Mm-hmm.
and the ways that babies create secure brains, the ways that babies create an internalized sense of stability and self-connection. And the ways that babies create that is by having experiences of other people saying to them, "You make sense." And so it's like this happens pre-verbally before babies even have words. We see it in the research of Beatrice Beebe out of New York City, that when the moms are relating to the babies in a way that says to the baby, "Yeah, of course you're angry, of course you're sad, of course you're delighted," then the baby, it's like the baby's brain is going, "Oh, good, I make sense." And these moments of trauma, it turns out, are not specific moments. They're actually moments in which there was nobody with us and we couldn't be with ourselves. It's like we blew our own fuses, or the trauma blew our fuses. So we can tell what's blown our fuses by what comes back as a persistent, intrusive memory that we don't want.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a sign that nobody was with us.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we start a time travel practice of moving through time and space to be with the parts of ourselves that had these difficult experiences, like we said, they're all still right there waiting for us. They don't know that they're in the past. They're like, "Oh, good, somebody's come." and we say to ourselves, "Of course you're angry. Of course you're scared. Of course you're experiencing total mind-blowing alarmed aloneness in this moment." And as we say, "of course," to ourselves, the body relaxes. The messages of the body in the moment of the trauma are received. The traffic jam of emotions gets to be resolved through expression and naming. The brain calms. The amygdala calms. The hippocampus, that beautiful organ that contextualizes and gives us a sense of meaning and plugs our experiences into our larger life story. The hippocampus gets to go, "Oh, of course this was a difficult moment. And of course I've had trouble public speaking ever since. No wonder I was so scared of public speaking," our hippocampus says once that amygdala memory is held. So we're really soothing, calming, transforming the tangles of trauma with this kind of self-resonance.
The acknowledgement of course is almost, I guess that does go back to the inner child work, because when you're a child and you're crying or you're upset, when little Sarah, when little Hilary have an upset, having the nurturing having that nurturing coming at you of course that hurt. Of course. So this really does sound a lot like the inner child work. If we're not healing the adult that's upset, we're going back to nurturing the young part of ourselves that really was triggered and traumatized by that.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes the young part of ourselves is 1 week ago.
I hear that. And that's okay too.
Yes, it is.
Just careful with that contract.
Where it comes from. If it's poking its head up and it feels yucky, it means it needs accompaniment.
Absolutely. Oh, that's, and I think the other thing is we really do need to find humor in what has happened and what we've witnessed in our lives, because not to lessen it. We have a conversation regularly within the Havening community about, what trauma is. An event must have happened. It has to have meaning. There's a landscape around it, and there's a feeling of inescapability, right? That designates a trauma. And by doing the work, whatever work it is you choose to do with whoever, and hopefully please reach out if you do need help, because there is somebody that can help you, whatever means you choose. But the beauty of it is that I think a lot of people hold on to their upsets thinking this defines them, but understanding that you can face your traumas and not live with them for the rest of your life. They can just become a fleeting thought or an event or something that happened to you. Take power in that. I lived through this, and my pain is my power.
And Resmaa Menakem has that wonderful quote. He says that we call individual trauma personality, and we call family trauma family history, and we call societal trauma culture. So if we start to really see the impact of trauma on every level of the systems that we live in, then we begin to see, it's not carved in stone. These experiences of a lack of accompaniment at any level are not carved in stone. They're simply an expression of things that have not yet been resolved.
For those who might not be familiar with nonviolent communication, can you express a little more about that?
Yes, sure. So in nonviolent communication, we're looking at the ways that habitual use of language has this funny element of unconscious violence in it. That if we're trying to make somebody do something, we're not in true relationship with them. And that the more we move out of the idea that we know what's best for somebody else, and the more we move toward a place of exploration of somebody else, the more we create relational connection. And the man who created nonviolent communication, Marshall Rosenberg, I don't think that he knew that he was a walking neuroscientist, but that's what I believe that he was. I think he was in a deep exploration of what makes human brains relax. And one of the things that he discovered was that when we talk about the deep context, the deep needs and longings and values that lie behind people's actions, that we find commonality is, of course, an exploration in neuroscience. Like, what is the foundational starting point of human brains? And this we see also in the beautiful work of Ian McGilchrist, who's talking about what happens when our right hemisphere gets to really contribute the deep values and longings that we have. What kinds of strategies do then we enact? What does the left hemisphere end up doing if we're actually rooted in our values instead of coming from some cognitive idea about what other people should be doing?
Can you give an example of what a sentence might be and sound like where one is practicing nonviolent communication compared to one that's not, just to give people an idea of what it might sound like when we're expressing in a much more loving and gentle way?
Yeah, well, I could be angry with a family member, and I could say, "Why are you? I don't understand why you're taking this action that's going to hurt us. I mean, what the heck are you doing? Why are you fill in the blank, using money in this way? Why are you using alcohol in this way? Why are you using drugs in this way? Why have you turned away from your friend? I mean, there's like this sort of language of recrimination and accusation that can be such a part of daily life for all of us. And if we begin to move toward an understanding that that accusation is violent, then we're going to say something more like, when I see you doing this with our money, I'm terrified. My stomach hurts, and I feel so helpless and hopeless, and I'm just wanting partnership. Can you talk to me about what's going on for you? Which is a very different way of moving toward conflict, is to move toward conflict with a sense of, why are we upset? What is the deep context that's driving us? And what the heck's happening for our friend or partner? Why are they doing these funny things that are difficult and destructive?
And there's a sense of vulnerability in that second phase, a sense of, I need you. I need us. I need that togetherness rather than pointing fingers that will obviously put us in a defense mode, right? Why are you doing this or that? Rather than, I can really use you right now, yeah?
Yeah.
So changing gears here, we're living through this time now, which is very tumultuous, this pandemic. We are facing a lot of unrest. A lot of people are expressing their opinions publicly, which everyone has a right to do, but there is a lot of unkindness that's being expressed. And it's gotten to quite a heightened level, very activating. How do we take control of something like that without being a hermit or crawling into a hole and removing ourselves from society? What would you suggest?
A constant practice of self-accompaniment, walking beside ourselves all the time, just as much as possible, learning how to walk beside ourselves and say, of course, and how to walk beside ourselves in true affection and warmth for the self, because what really disrupts self-warmth is trauma, is unaccompanied experience. And as soon as we start to understand that, then we understand sort of the habits that keep us from being with ourselves. And the being with self on a brain level is the very most foundational starting point for well-being and for an improved immune system, which my goodness, we all need right now. We need as much access to our immune strength as possible. And then we also need to know our own bodies, we get to ask ourselves the question as we're dealing with the pandemic. We get to say, okay, I'm going to go to work. Work pays the bills, keeps my family fed. And there's danger, but I'm going to accompany myself into that world. Or if we're somebody who's really has health issues and has decided to kind of really retract or pull back from the world, we get to say, okay, what really moves us? How do we find connection? How do we find self-connection? How do we create connection with others, even if we don't get to be with them physically?
Do you believe that's important? In addition to having your own personal time and solitude. I mean, I know in the last 8 months, it's offered me an opportunity to go within and really do some personal work because I've had the time and the space, but also there is an importance of community and connection, and it's imperative not to just go into this recluse place. We truly need others.
Yeah, we do. And I love what Stephen Porges said. He said, we need to understand that we are connecting when we're on Zoom, that we're used to the flat screen being an entertainment device that's just a download for us. We need to realize, we're here, and we get to participate, and we get to feel each other, even if we're not getting to be together physically.
Yeah, it's a good balance to have that time to grow and to ask yourself questions, but then use what you're learning and go out there in the world and share it with others. Find this space to share this beautiful way of being. And to be honest, Sarah, I've learned just from those who brought you into my life how to speak more powerfully and loving towards myself and others. And I love practicing it, having conversations where it's incorporated and becomes second nature when we do it more and more. So if we're not sharing that gift, what are we doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
So as we wrap things up, I do want to say thank you, Sarah, for sharing your time with me and with Holistically Speaking listeners. But I love to have a little fun with my guests and do a rapid fire where I throw out a word and you think of the first word that comes to mind. And these are words I come up with while we're just having our conversation here. So it's relatively new to me as well. And we can just see how the dance goes. So are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, this is a little game I like to play. All right, Sarah, here we go. Gentleness.
Tenderness.
Resonance.
Attunement.
Meditation.
Calming.
Connection.
Warmth.
Joy.
Delight.
And empathy.
Being with.
Love.
More love.
Oh, I love that. Beautiful. You paused and it was really beautiful right there. So during our last few moments, I would just love for you to share with listeners a final thought. What would you, Sarah Peyton, like to leave with them?
In this moment, if you bring your best self to come and sit beside you, and this best self turns to you and says, "Of course." How does your body do with that message from your own best self?
Beautiful. Of course. Of course. I'm going to remind myself to say that more. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sarah. It has been such a pleasure to hold space for you and spend time with you. I can only imagine the listeners are going to feel your energy and your light. So thank you. Thank you for your resonant self.
Oh, Hilary, thank you for having me. Such a pleasure.
You can learn more about Sarah Peyton, her book, Your Resonant Self, and the beautiful work she does by visiting her website, empathybrain.com. That link is also on the podcast page. And as a gift to listeners, Sarah is giving away a signed copy of her book, Your Resonant Self. Just head over to my Instagram at Hilary Russo for details, and good luck. It's truly a gift to self. If you're ready to transform your traumas to triumphs, learn more about havening techniques and the work that I'm doing, and work with me personally, drop me a line on my website at hilaryrusso.com and set up a free discovery call. I'd love to support you on your healing journey. Holistically Speaking is produced by Alan Seals with music by Lipbone Redding. Connection is everything, my friend, and it's why I'm here, because of you. Until next time, be kind to your mind. And don't forget to laugh.